Okay, so let's get started here. Now, naturally, half of our course is JavaScript. And in our opinion, in this course, JavaScript is the programming language that holds the internet together, that creates that data layer for the internet. So we're able to move data around the internet because of your JavaScript, which is important. But it also means that, do we want your users to be looking at the data? No, we want them to be looking at something that's presented, that's clean, that has some professionalism, that has some design quality to it. So in reality, this JavaScript is really just half of the job. Now for you all in this class, by just a few matter of weeks, you all will be doing professionally, internet grade secure JavaScript. Where you're going to be moving data around the internet in a way that's more secure than 99% of the internet, which is good. And it means that it's going to be hard to take your sites down. It's going to be hard to make your sites crash. It's going to be hard to get at your customer data. A lot of the things that we're allergic to, you guys aren't going to have that problem. You're going to be inoculated against so much of the maladies of the internet. But I think here, let's just say that, well, who cares about that if your site is boring? There's also a pop cultural element where your site should be quite gorgeous and beautiful. And so just check out this code right here. You got the H1 inside the body and you get the HTML. But what this creates from last lecture is something pretty dry. And that in itself is a fault. Let's say this. Let's go to Craigslist. Incredibly important site, the history of the internet. Does this look as cool as Tumblr? Does it look as cool as Twitter? In many ways, the look and the feel of this site is from another decade. Now, I frankly think that there are a bunch of guys sitting in an old Victorian, and they're saying, we don't need to upgrade Craigslist. The last thing we want to do is roll with the times. We can't be insecure about how we look. Let's just not make it look great. Does that make sense? Do you know guys like that? And the only reason I put it back on the male gender is that as a 40-year-old, I feel that way. I don't want to change just because I got pressure. In many ways, I want to push back against the pressure and say, no, you change. I'm Craigslist. I don't have to look good. I'm Craig. Look at what I do. I got a beautiful home in South Bakersfield to sell you. Do you have a beautiful home in South Bakersfield to sell me? No. So I'm not going to change. Now, the joke here is that there's very little styling that's happening here, and it looks like somebody from a high school HTML class did a final project, and the teacher was like, good job. Now you can take an advanced web development class in January when you come back from spring break, back from winter break. So there's very little style going on here. So it's a very default style. It's not saying that this is not, a $1 billion site, which it is. But for you all who are new, your site should look sweet. Let's face it. Now, it's true that, so NPR. Now, again, I apologize for going to a news site. News and journalism is politics. That's what it is. It's free because it's pushing a political agenda. So you have to excuse the content of these pages. I'm sure it's just horrendous content. But the truth is, they have great style. NPR has a very, very cutting-edge site. It looks great. Do you want this, or do you want something that has more polish? Now, NPR takes millions of dollars from the Russian government every year. Whenever you hear an ad for Kaspersky, Kaspersky is the KGB. So this is not exactly inoculated from, the bad stuff in the world. But they have a great-looking website. Now, again, Huffington Post, again, maybe its politics is not your favorite, and it has a very dry look and feel. The styling is not so great. Does that make sense? I definitely think that they could learn a thing or two about style. But here's the deal. When you make an ugly website, people tend to pay attention to it. And the granddaddy of them all, the Drudge Report, trigger warning, conservative news coming up. The Drudge Report, looks, I mean, I think that the Huffington Post is kind of like, hey, let's look as much like the Drudge Report as possible. The Drudge Report is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And it looks like something you'd code in the first week of class. And, you know, I challenge you. I mean, the most advanced thing that happens on the Drudge Report is that it refreshes itself every 2 minutes. That's like the most advanced. It's like the same bunch of guys that made Craigslist are like, hey, let's hang out with the Drudge Report people and talk about style. Hey, what are you doing on Craigslist? Oh, nothing. Sweet. We won't do it if you guys won't do it. It's like the same bunch of like 40-year-old guys like, the world is going to heck in a handbasket. So looking at the inspect element here, and if you take a look, that Drudge has a fair amount of analytics, you know, because it is on a $100 million site. But the CSS, here's the CSS. That is the limit to the style. That's how much style is in the Drudge Report. You could describe the style of the Drudge Report in about 3 lines, okay? Now, I'm not going to compare them, but, you know, frankly, NPR, I would expect for NPR, and I haven't hacked NPR's site very deeply, but I would expect that, you know, that there's quite a bit more, again, lots of analytics, but when you go looking for their, do a fabulous job here. When you take a look for their CSS, you know, there's quite a bit more happening here. And let's kind of target in some of the areas. So when you look at an image on, again, this is NPR. Remember the big weird picture right there? This is all the CSS encoding that's happening in the background just to make that image look that way. And I can do that by clicking on that image. But you can see how the style is such a big part of. So all of those properties are embedded within that HTML element. Now, just to go a little bit deeper, CSS, here's an example CSS page. Let's open that up with, you know, a text editor. Xcode is pretty good. Let's open it up with. You can see here that when Bootstrap does its stuff, there are thousands of lines of styling. So if you have a button, this is the way that it looks. The borders are colored. That's a hexadecimal code for an internet-safe color. That's the color of the border. That's what the background of the button looks like. That's the image that's at the background of the button. You know, buttons are really just images. And when you click it, one image goes on, and when you release from it, another image appears. When you hover over it, another image appears. That's what causes the appearance of a button. Here's that background image of various, you know, hovering. There's a little bit of shadowing that goes with it. And, you know, if we go into focus on that button, you know, we touch the button, the background color changes a little bit. That's a hexadecimal representation of the color. And as you move through it, you have thousands of properties that build up the sum total of the Bootstrap page. And Bootstrap is very effective in modifying the way that it looks based upon the size of the browser window. That's what's happening. Also, the text and the menuing looks very, very good. And they have wonderful, wonderful web development capacity here. So in order to make your JavaScript responsive, we're going to use Bootstrap. It's a very standard professional practice. You can go to work directly after my class if you're using that concert of skills. Good. So the next thing in Bootstrap is let's go ahead and download Bootstrap. You guys can touch that button. And what it's going to do is it's going to download. And what you'd like to do is, and your Bootstrap page may look a little bit different. Like, for example, your Bootstrap may look like this because you're on laptops. Mine looks like this because my screen has been compressed for the LCD. but you should go ahead and download plain old Bootstrap. The source code is also valuable, but it helps you to study the underlying JavaScript and the underlying less. And then the Sass there, that's the underlying technology that helps to format Bootstrap on the fly so that it looks good seconds after loading. So go ahead and download Bootstrap, and it will go into your downloads folder. If you're a Mac person, this is what it'll look like, but if you're a Windows person, it's equally convenient. You just go to your downloads folder, and you'll see a folder there called Bootstrap Dist, and that stands for distribution. And what you can do is you can literally copy and paste that to your desktop. Notice I put that right here. And then you can begin to put, and this, you're going to see these 3 folders there, JavaScript, CSS, and fonts. You won't see these files there, but for your homework, you guys can immediately begin to create your HTML files inside of the Bootstrap dist folder. Does that make sense? And what that's going to do is it's going to put all of JavaScript, all of Bootstrap's potential right next to your web pages, and it will show you how to link to that Bootstrap. So it becomes very convenient. So you can do that for a sec. I'm going to move forward just because we're on YouTube and you guys can pause me. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a file called unit1bootstrap.html. And I just want to show you that I've pushed it up to our GitHub. Oh, there it was. Right in our Unit 1, Basic JavaScript, Basic Bootstrap Nav. And this is the Unit 1 bootstrap.html. You can take a look at the content of that. Now, let's say this. There are some lines here that I'm not going to explain today. I'm not going to explain that these are important lines. The meta are what gets read by search engines to describe what the page is about, and who wrote it, and these meta tags. We're going to ignore that. The fav icon is the sweet little icon that appears in this side of the web address bar, like a little picture. Does Drudge have it? No, Drudge does not do fav icons. Drudge is a real man site. They don't try to look good. Huffington Post, yeah, they have a sweet fav icon right there. They're trying to look good. They're at least making an effort. Drudge, something that has a name like Drudge doesn't try to look good. Oh, no. There's a fav icon there. Look, they have a fav icon. They paid $14 for a fav icon to get made. You get in trouble talking about Drudge Report at college campuses. I say bring it on. But let's go on in here. So the meta stuff, we don't need to talk about that right now. The fav icon, we don't need the fav icon. But check it out what's happening right here. Link href. What's happening here is it's telling the HTML compiler, hey, I have a CSS that I want you to read. It happens to be right next door to it in the CSS right here. And so please use that CSS when you load my page. And I'll talk about how the CSS is integrated in a minute. Let's just talk about it now. Now, in order to make HTML, you're actually going to declare the class that is being used. And if you take a look at the CSS and you go look for that class, navbar wrapper, that should be here. The navbar wrapper class, nope, couldn't find it, sorry. The navbar wrapper class has some encoding that will make it appear a certain way. The same with the container class. And so you'll find this week when you run our examples that your HTML will have a lot of flavor. Your HTML will have a lot of identity. It will have a lot of culture built into it. It will have style. And you're saying, well, how did I get the style? Where did the style come from? And the answer is the CSS gives you the style. The JavaScript gives you the data. The CSS helps your HTML get styling. The coloration, the font, the background, all the flavor that goes into it. So the way your project is going to be organized, and you know what your micro project is, it's to make 4 web pages that link from your central page. And here I have page 1 and page 2. And I have my drop down, it goes to page 3. Hi, welcome to page 3. And then welcome to page 4. Now, page 4 is a little bit different. Page 4 looks really good. And you may say, well, does page 4 have style and page 1 does not? Page 1 looks like the Drudge Report, right? Like no style. And it lacks the navigation. Page 4 looks kind of good. It looks like HuffPo, right? And the way that that takes place, I don't know if you're into news culture or not. Some people are, some people are not. Page 4 is unique because when I open that up using a text editor, I was just using Xcode a moment ago successfully. My bad. Hopefully that won't take too long. And let's just open up page 4 using Safari. You can see that at the top of page 4, I've treated page 4 like my primary page, and that I've put the same meta encoding into it. And then I've also linked to the same CSS that I did in my first page. So here's my first page. And you can see that I've linked to Bootstrap right inside of the head element right there. I said, hi, if you would grab the CSS Bootstrap min, please. That will give my page styling and look good. And you can see that that's what I'm using here on the website when I have the Unit 1 Bootstrap page. I said, hi, go ahead and link to that CSS. And that single line turns on all the sweet look and feel for that page. Now, some of this other stuff is happening. I'm not going to talk about this. You're welcome to slam it in there. I'm also not using the carousel.css. This is the single line that turns on the styling in the page. Now, what I'm doing is I'm kind of getting you guys used to CSS just by practice. And what's good is it's never good to have students even know that they can code HTML without CSS. Like, you guys, no one should tell you that. Because you could just code plain old vanilla HTML forever, but it will be hard to be employed. The only place that will take you as a web developer is the Drudge Report. And I don't even think they have an active web developer. I think it's just a guy who just kind of puts up links, stays up late. You know, there's not a strong sense that there's a web developer there. HuffPo will ask you to have a CSS. And what half the internet does is they just download Bootstrap CSSs. That's what everybody's been using for a few years now. You know, so you're kind of par for the course. Now, here's how we make this awesome menu. This sweet menu is going to help you get your homework done because you need to be able to navigate. This is how we're making that happen. Firstly, we're going to go into the body, and you guys know from the last lecture that the body is the part of the page that everybody sees. First, you have the head, where you have all the CSSs, and you have all the includes, and then the body is kind of the public part that you want everybody to see, right? The public body. Now, the divs are like big boxes that have dimensions. They have a height, they have a width, they might have a background, they have a margin and a padding. So when I set on my, so that is a, that is a div right there. And this is what, this is the dimensions of that nav bar. It has a padding, has a border, has a margin, and then its general size is 720 by 50. And that's what's called a box model, and that box model pertains to all div elements. We'll talk a lot more about that. Div is really important in web design because you can break your page up into squares, and Bootstrap helps you to break your page up into squares. So what if you wanted a row of your page to be 12 units long? Oh, that's cool. We can put 12 different units there. What if we wanted there to be 4 big columns, 3 units wide? Well, Bootstrap helps you to do that. It gives you a grid. Now, don't worry if I'm going fast because we're going to go over that box model a lot. And we're also going to go over that Bootstrap grid model a lot to the point that you're not going to be, you're just going to do it. You're just going to know it. Okay? But the div is the fundamental building block of web design. Everything is a div. And so for you guys as programmers, you're going to always be reaching out and touching a div and filling it with data using the inner HTML tag. GetElementById.InnerHTML, that's the secret sauce. If you're getting that right now, you're ahead of the game. You're doing real good. I'm a little bit aggressive in presenting the ideas that challenge people the most and giving you the most time to master them. So the first week, you guys are responsive. The first week, you guys are using CSS. The first week, you guys are using GetElementById. That's the challenging stuff. If you can just kind of, repeat that, you're going to be pro fast because that's what we all do. Okay, great. So here you have these classes, the navbar wrapper. You need that. You need a div class called a container. The container gives you a row of spacing to work with. And then you're going to kind of copy a little bit of this. And now here's where you're going to put in your links. And I've updated this project a little bit. You can see what these links are. href is horizontal reference. That's a hyperlink. You know when you go to a hyperlink and it's like underlined? That's a horizontal reference, a link. And so inside of a horizontal reference, we can put a URL. A URL is a web address. It can either be a fully qualified domain name, which links to a site outside of yours, or it can be a page within your site. Both are URLs, and the href supplies a URL. Now this pound sign right here, it's actually referring back to that same page. And that's what's called an anchor. And we're not gonna do a lot with anchors this week. We actually just want to deal with hyperlinks. So what I've done here is I've updated this page. And let me just kind of work with Xcode for a sec. I don't know if that's very visible. Yeah, that's sweet. Makes it look like an Apple keynote. This is going to be my sort of main page, and that's the head. And I'm going to go back down to the nav bar. And this stuff it's a little bit of brain damage. You're just going to copy and paste it over. And then I want you to start to pay attention to this part right here. And I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm sorry if it's hard to see on the bulletin board. Maybe we can make that bigger. Yeah, that's really hard. Can you see this size, or is that just impossible? It's hard? Well, you'll see the YouTube. What you have right here, yeah, that's pretty hard to see. Let's boost that up a little bit. It's probably better. So this is the head part that we were talking about earlier. Then you go down beyond this comment right here. That's where you style the nav bar. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go into the nav bar div. and you see that it has a collapsible nav bar. And then you're going to create what's called an unordered list, or a UL. Now, traditionally in HTML, if you have an unordered list, it gives you bullets, like little dots next to the lines, like you would have it in Word. But within much of HTML5 and Bootstrap, the unordered list gives you this. It gives you this block right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my href to page1.html, my href here to page 2. I'm going to use the text 1, 2, and then page 3, and then page 4. And what that's going to give me is 1, 2, page 3, and then page 4. And then when I want to go to page 3, I'm going to navigate there. And then when I go to page 4, I'm going to navigate there. And so it creates navigability into your website. Now, you may say, well, look, page 3 doesn't have the same cool nav bar on top, and you should put your nav bar on every page. And the same nav bar should be there so that every page looks awesome. Like page 1, it doesn't have navigability. I need to press the back bar. Same with 2, not so great. And so you want your awesome drop down, your awesome menu to be there. And plus, project name should be overwritten. So instead of it being project name, it should be Paula's awesome site. Did I spell her name right? Don't answer. I know. I'm just kidding. Is that wrong? I'm sorry. I'll have to work on it. You said to pronounce it this way, though. Okay, so I'll just say my awesome site, or we'll say that lady's awesome site. And save that, and then unit1 bootstrap.html. That awesome lady's site. All right, sweet. So now you get a sense of how that should work. Now let's just quickly go over to page 4 that's having so much success. Page 4 looks great. So let's open that up, and you can see that page 4 simply has the nav bar in it. So I could kind of copy paste that nav and just go copy, paste, and then you're going to get your nav bar. Not so bad? It really isn't. The tough part of this is just getting Bootstrap, linking to it in your head, and then also getting this absolute link to work so that it's pointing at the CSS folder, at the Bootstrap, min in the CSS folder. And those of you who've done a little Unix already can see why that's working well, because it uses the Unix path standard, where it looks at the CSS folder because the CSS folder is right next to it. Here's that page, or page 4, and then there's a CSS right next to it, same top level.
Can you show again which part to copy and paste to get the Bootstrap?
Yeah. This is the head.
Okay.
And that head is finished, right? You see how you have an end tag to end that tag? So
you go from head to head,
finish head.
And you just copy all that
then you
over
get
to,
into
like,
the body. Yeah, you get into the body, and you're going to kind of go, and you kind of have to follow all of these. And I tried to make it neat. You're going to copy all these. Now look at all the finishings. Isn't that tough to follow? Like which div am I finishing? Which nav is finishing? The nav class begins right here. That's important. And then you have div 1 and div 2 right above that. So you're going to finish the nav, then you have div and div to finish. Very rhythmic, very, very lyrical. It's just something. It's like somebody said the other day, some smart person, who can take credit for the smart remark. They said, oh, the end tag is kind of like the semicolon at the end of the line in Java. And I was like, yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. That's really good. I'm going to remember that next time. Then also, you're going to need this at the bottom, so it pulls some of the interactivity together, and then you're going to close the body in the HTML, and then a big piece of your micro project should be done. So just to review, and I'll keep this as short as I can, the first move is going to be to do examples 1 through 12 in this document. Here's 1, and there's 2, and you should code them all. And I invite you to use the template.html to start each one of them, which will give you a base starting point for a script as well as a page. Or you could code it all, right? The more you code, the smarter you will get. Like the more value you will be. The more that you copy paste, the less good you will be. Does that make sense? Copying and pasting could be valuable. Most of the time it won't be as valuable as you'd like it to be. So perhaps copy or print out this PDF, do the first 12 so that you know what is happening there, and then check out this example. And then that should give you enough to be able to wrap up the micro project here in the syllabus. Clear, good to go? All right, thanks a lot. Good work.